I never liked family dinners. Not really. They always felt more like performances than gatherings, everyone playing their part, pretending things were fine when they weren't. Still, I went that Sunday, maybe because my ex-wife insisted, maybe because I still held on to some foolish hope that things could be fixed, or maybe because I refused to admit that my own daughter didn't want me around anymore. The house looked warm and glowing from the outside, strung with the last of the Christmas lights even though the holidays had come and gone. Claire stood by the front door, welcoming people in with that tight smile she got from her mother. I brought a bottle of wine, not because I thought anyone cared, but because it's what you're supposed to do when you show up somewhere uninvited. Inside, the air was thick, not with warmth or laughter, but with something heavier, an awkward quiet that made your skin feel too tight. I spotted Sarah on the couch, my younger daughter, pretending not to see me. She offered a glance, quick and flat, before looking away. No one hugged me. No one asked how I'd been. Just the usual clinking of silverware and the faint smell of roast chicken, trying to cover up the stench of something rotten underneath. At the table, I listened. I heard updates about Claire's new job, Sarah's boyfriend, their mother's trip to California. These were stories I hadn't been part of, lives I didn't know anymore. It was like watching strangers talk about a world I used to belong to. Then came the silence. That heavy, loaded silence that falls when everyone knows something's about to be said. Claire placed her napkin in her lap. Her voice was calm, too calm. "You shouldn't be here." That's what she said, right there, in front of her mother, in front of Sarah, like I was a stain on her perfect evening. And no one spoke, not Sarah, not my ex-wife. No gasp, no correction, no defense. Just the quiet ringing in my ears, and the sound of my heart breaking in a way I didn't know was still possible. I stayed seated, ate the rest of my meal. Not because I was hungry, but because I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me walk out. Each bite burned going down, like swallowing glass. But I finished. I placed my napkin beside my plate, looked at my ex-wife and said, "Thank you for dinner." Claire had already turned her head away. Sarah didn't look up, and I walked out. The drive home was silent. No radio, just the words echoing in my mind like a bell tolling for a funeral. You shouldn't be here. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was about all of it. The years I tried to stay in touch, the birthdays missed, the messy divorce that no one ever really forgave. It was about being erased. I stepped into my house where I'd raised them both. The house with the backyard swing I installed for Claire when she was 5, the one with her pink-painted walls still untouched upstairs, and I walked straight to the desk, pulled out the papers I hadn't looked at in months. The deed was still in my name alone. That night I made the decision. I was going to sell it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee that went cold before I took a single sip. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room, but inside my head, it was chaos. Faces, words, that dinner. Her face when she said it, so calm, so certain, like I was a problem she had finally decided to name out loud. You shouldn't be here. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't a heat of the moment kind of thing. It was planned, measured. Claire had thought it through, probably rehearsed it. She wanted to say it. She wanted to hurt me, and I let her. I kept thinking back to when she was little, the way she'd climb onto my lap after dinner, rest her head on my chest, and ask me to hum Moon River until she fell asleep. I used to believe those moments meant something that couldn't be erased, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe the past only matters if people choose to carry it forward. Maybe she'd set hers down years ago. I stared at the deed sitting in front of me. The house was fully paid off. I'd made every mortgage payment even after the divorce. I kept it not just because it was home, but because part of me thought Claire or Sarah might want it someday. Thought maybe they'd bring their families here. Thought they'd see it for what it was, a symbol of where we started, not where we ended. But Claire didn't want me there, not in her life, not in that house. So what was I holding on to? The next morning I called a realtor. Her name was Lauren, calm voice, patient. Asked me why I was thinking of selling. I told her it was time, nothing more. She didn't pry. Within a week the listing was live. Photos of the living room where we used to build blanket forts, the hallway where Claire ran with Sarah's hand in hers, chasing imaginary monsters, the kitchen where I danced with their mother to Ella Fitzgerald on lazy Sundays before the world fell apart. It was surreal, seeing it all through the lens of a sales pitch. Charming four-bedroom home with natural light and spacious yard. It didn't say, this was the place where a father tried to hold his family together, but that's what it was. When Sarah found out, she called me. "Dad, you're selling the house?" I hadn't expected her to care. She'd always been more distant, more careful with her feelings. But there was something in her voice, hurt maybe, or confusion, that made my throat tighten. "Yeah," I said, "it's time." There was a long pause. Then softly she asked, "Is it because of what Claire said?" I didn't answer right away. "No," I finally said. "It's because of what no one else said." That quiet at the dinner table had spoken louder than anything Claire ever could. It told me I didn't belong, not just in that house, but in their world. Sarah didn't argue, didn't say I was wrong. She just whispered, "Okay," and hung up. The silence after that call felt heavier than the one at dinner. The real estate agent scheduled the first open house for a Saturday morning. I spent the night before walking through each room like I was saying goodbye to someone I loved, but didn't know how to keep. In the hallway upstairs, I stopped in front of the small crack on the wall near the linen closet. Claire tripped there when she was 8, running barefoot, laughing, chasing Sarah with a glittery magic wand. Her elbow hit the drywall, left a dent. I told her I'd fix it, I never did. Somehow it always felt like a little piece of our story, like some memories are meant to stay etched into the structure. I touched the wall now, lightly. My fingers didn't even fit in the crack anymore. The house had aged with me. When the first couple walked through the door the next day, Lauren greeted them warmly, stepping into her well-rehearsed lines about the open-concept kitchen and original hardwood floors. I stood off to the side, pretending to read something on my phone. Watching strangers walk through my life felt wrong, like letting tourists into a cathedral no one prayed in anymore. One woman admired the backyard and said it would be great for kids. I almost told her about the sandbox I built with Claire when she was 6, the one where she buried her toy unicorn and cried for 3 days thinking it was lost forever. But I didn't say anything. No one needed to know the ghosts that lived here. That evening I found myself in Claire's old room. The walls were still pink. I'd never painted over them. There were faint outlines of old posters she'd once taped up, Taylor Swift, some boy band I never understood. On the windowsill, there was a scratch in the wood. She carved her initials there when she was 13, CLB. I told her not to. She said it was her room and she could do what she wanted. I let her win that one. Now, standing in that room, I thought about how far we had drifted. She wasn't always cold. There were years when we were close, when she would call me just to talk, when I was the one she trusted with secrets she didn't share with her mom. But after the divorce, things changed. Not overnight, but slowly, quietly, like water eroding stone. I tried to stay in her life. I called, I showed up. I gave space when asked, but somehow space turned into absence, and absence turned into anger. When the divorce papers were signed, I offered the house to her mother. She didn't want it, said it held too many memories. So I stayed. Maybe I believed that holding on to the house would somehow hold the family together. But now it was just a building. 4 walls filled with shadows. Later that week, Claire texted me. "Sarah told me you're selling the house. That's petty, Dad. You know that, right?" I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands were trembling, not with anger, but with a kind of sadness I couldn't put into words. I typed, "It's not petty. It's peace," and I sent it before I could change my mind. She didn't reply. That night I slept in the living room. No bed, no blankets, just me and the emptiness of a house waiting to become someone else's. A few offers came in within the first week. One from a young couple with a baby on the way. Another from a middle-aged man recently divorced, looking to start over. Each offer came with its own weight, not just in dollars but in meaning. These people weren't just buying a house, They were buying a chance at something I couldn't hold on to. Lauren called on a Thursday evening to say the highest bid came from the couple. She sounded pleased, her voice full of professional warmth. "Do you want to accept it?" she asked. I hesitated. Part of me was still hoping for something, an apology, a phone call, some kind of sign that this wasn't all for nothing. But I knew better. Hoping had always been my downfall. "Yes," I said. "Let's accept." I sat at the kitchen table after that call, the same table where Claire did her homework while I made dinner, where Sarah told me she didn't want to go to ballet anymore, where my ex-wife once laughed so hard at something I said she snorted wine through her nose. Everything that mattered had happened in that kitchen, and now it was going to be someone else's. The next day I started packing. I found boxes in the garage and began with the easiest things, the books, the dishes, old blankets from the linen closet. But then I opened the bottom drawer of the old desk in the office, and there it was. A drawing Claire made when she was maybe 7. It was crude, stick figures and crooked hearts, but unmistakable. A picture of the three of us, me, Claire, and Sarah. Above it, she'd written in big, uneven letters, "My family, the best dad ever." I sat on the floor with that paper in my hands and felt something collapse inside me. How do we go from that to "you shouldn't be here"? I don't know how long I sat there, holding that drawing like it was the last artifact of a time that used to exist. I remembered the day she gave it to me. I'd had a hard week at work, missed dinner 2 nights in a row, and came home feeling like a failure. She ran to the door, handed it to me, and said, "So you don't forget." I didn't forget. They did. Or maybe they just chose to see only the parts of me that disappointed them. The next box I packed was full of old toys, a plastic tea set, a doll missing one eye. I could still hear Claire's voice pretending to host tea parties for invisible guests, insisting I wear a silly hat and call her Madam. I packed it all gently, as if the memories might break. By Sunday, I had cleared out most of the upstairs. Each empty room echoed now. You could hear your own breath. Sarah texted that night, "Can I come by just for a minute?" It was almost midnight. "Of course," I replied. 20 minutes later, she pulled into the driveway. She stood on the porch like she wasn't sure she was welcome. I opened the door. She looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the dim porch light. Maybe it was the way she was hugging her arms tight around herself. "I just wanted to see it one more time," she said. I nodded and stepped aside. She walked in slowly, eyes scanning the living room, the stairs, the walls. She didn't say anything for a long while. Then she whispered, "I hate what she said to you." I swallowed hard. "I know," I said. "She shouldn't have said that." I didn't answer, because the truth was, she did say it, and no one stopped her. Sarah looked at me then, eyes shining with something between guilt and sadness. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything," she said. "I was just stunned." I looked at her, my daughter, this woman who still carried the shape of the little girl I used to read bedtime stories to. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." We stood there for a while, in the quiet of a house that was no longer ours. Sarah didn't stay long that night. We walked through the house together, room by room, like we were visiting the past. She touched the edge of the fireplace where we used to hang stockings, smiled faintly at the dent in the baseboard from a clumsy birthday game of tag. In Claire's old room she paused, looking at the walls, still painted in that soft pink. She was so proud of this room, she said quietly. I nodded. She picked the color herself, said it made her feel safe. Sarah didn't respond. She just kept her gaze on the wall, and I could see her shoulders rise and fall with a quiet breath. "I used to think we'd always have this," she said after a moment. "The house. The memories, even if we weren't all together." I thought so too, I admitted. We walked back downstairs, and she lingered by the door. Her hand brushed the frame like she was touching something sacred. Then she turned to me. "Are you angry with her?" I didn't answer right away. It was a complicated question. Anger didn't quite cover it. What I felt was deeper. A kind of grief for something that was still alive but unreachable. No, I said finally. I'm not angry. I'm just tired. She nodded as if she understood. Before she left, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo. It was old, us on a camping trip, sitting around a fire, marshmallows in hand, both girls in oversized hoodies. Claire had her head on my shoulder. Sarah was laughing. I found this last week, she said. Thought maybe you'd want it. I took it gently. My hands shook a little. Thank you. She gave me a quick hug, the kind that says more than words. Then she was gone. I stood in the doorway long after her car disappeared down the road, the photo still in my hand. The night around me was still, heavy with the kind of silence you can't quite name. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table again and looked at that photo until the sun came through the window. Later that day, I started boxing up the last of the things in the garage. Tools I hadn't touched in years. A soccer ball deflated and dusty. Claire's old bicycle, still with the little bell she insisted on having even after she was too old for it. I hesitated with that one. Something about it felt final, but I packed it anyway. By evening, the house was nearly empty. I ordered takeout and sat on the living room floor, eating out of the container like I did in college. The rooms echoed now. No laughter, no footsteps. Just me and the ghosts of what used to be. Claire hadn't reached out again. Not a call, not a message. Nothing. It was like I'd been written out of her story. But even so, I kept the photo Sarah gave me close. Proof that once we were a family, even if only for a moment. The day of the final walkthrough arrived. Lauren met me early in the morning, clipboard in hand, her tone light, professional. She moved through each room with practiced efficiency, ticking boxes, making notes, mentioning things like foundation, finishings, and resale value, as if any of that mattered to me. To her, it was just another transaction. To me, it was a burial. I didn't say much, I just followed behind her, nodding when necessary, trying not to linger in doorways. But every room pulled something from me. An image, a sound, a feeling I hadn't expected. In the hallway upstairs, I remembered Claire's laughter as she roller skated inside the house one rainy afternoon. I told her not to. She did it anyway, fell hard. I rushed to her, picked her up before the tears came. She clung to me like I was the only thing that could stop the world from hurting her. I was that person once. As Lauren moved into the bedrooms, I paused by the closet in the master bedroom, my old room. There was still a box on the top shelf I hadn't touched. I pulled it down slowly. Inside, letters, photos, a necklace Claire made for me out of beads when she was 5, a drawing Sarah gave me on Father's Day, a few cards from birthdays long past, scrawled in the handwriting of children who once believed I hung the moon. I sat on the edge of the bed, mattress already gone, and held that beaded necklace in my hand. I couldn't even remember the last time I saw it. It was pink, green, and lopsided, with the word Dad spelled out in plastic squares. I felt the lump rise in my throat, sudden and hot. What do you do with the love that's no longer wanted? I put the necklace in my pocket. The rest I left in the box. Downstairs, Lauren was finishing up. She turned to me with a gentle smile. It's all ready. Just a signature, and the house is theirs. I hesitated, then signed. It was done. Later that night, I drove to a diner I used to take the girls to when they were young. It was still there. Same cracked leather booths, same faded menu. I sat in our old booth in the corner. The waitress didn't recognize me, which felt right somehow. I didn't recognize myself either. I ordered black coffee and stared out the window at the parking lot. My phone buzzed. A message from Claire. My heart jumped, then hesitated. It read, "Why are you doing this?" No greeting, no warmth, just that. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed, "Because I needed to let go, because holding on was only hurting me." I hit send. She read it. Didn't reply. I sat there for another hour, sipping coffee that turned bitter the longer it sat. Eventually, I left the diner, drove past the house one last time. It looked smaller now, not because it had changed, but because I finally saw it for what it was. A place I lived, not where I belonged. The day the house closed, I didn't go back. I couldn't. Lauren handled the keys, the final exchange, the smiling photo of the new couple in front of the sold sign. She sent me a text with the picture, like it might mean something. I didn't open it. Instead, I drove north. No destination, no plan. Just me and the open road. I stopped at small gas stations, walked through empty parks, sat in my car watching the sky change colors with the sun. It wasn't freedom I felt. It was something quieter, emptier. I booked a cheap motel room near a lake in Vermont. It was the off-season. No one was there, just rows of empty cabins and a stillness that felt like it belonged to someone else's story. That first night, I sat by the lake until it got too cold. I watched the ripples dance with the moonlight, thinking about the time I took Claire and Sarah camping upstate. Claire must have been 10. She got mad at me for not letting her bring her tablet, said I was the worst dad ever. That night, she fell asleep in my lap under the stars. The words kids say in anger you learn to forgive, but the ones they say as adults, those stick. The motel room smelled like old wood and forgotten summers. I laid on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I kept checking my phone, not even knowing what I hoped for. A text from Claire, an apology, a question. Nothing came, just silence. And silence has a way of making you relive everything you thought you buried. I started writing things down in a notebook I bought from a gas station. Not full sentences, just fragments. Memories, feelings, questions I'd never asked out loud. Did you ever miss me, Claire? Even once? Do you remember the way you used to call me Daddy and not just Dad? When did I stop being someone you loved and start being someone you tolerated? I filled 3 pages before I stopped. The next morning, I found a trail by the lake and walked for hours. The air was clean. The quiet was honest. No expectations. No one waiting for me to be anything. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Where are you?" "Just that." I replied, "Vermont, just clearing my head." She sent back a heart emoji, then a minute later, "Claire's been quiet too. I think she regrets what she said. She just doesn't know how to say it." I read those words over and over. I didn't know what to feel. Hope? Bitterness? Relief? Eventually I typed, "She doesn't have to say anything. Some silences speak loud enough." I didn't send it. Instead, I just stared at the lake until my eyes stopped trying to see her in the reflection. The days blurred together in that motel by the lake. I kept waking before dawn, not because I had somewhere to be, but because my body was still waiting for some kind of answer. A message, a knock on the door. Something. But it never came. I filled the silence with long walks, cheap coffee, and more pages in that gas station notebook. I didn't know why I kept writing. No one would read it. Maybe it was a way to talk to the parts of myself that still believed I mattered to my daughter. One morning, the motel clerk, a man named Tom with thick glasses and a gentle, wheezing laugh, asked how long I was planning to stay. "Not sure," I said. He nodded like he understood. "Sometimes a place like this isn't somewhere you go to, it's somewhere you go through." His words stuck with me. I liked that, go through. That afternoon I walked into town and found a second-hand bookstore. It smelled like old pages and rain-soaked wood. I browsed for an hour before I found a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, the same book I used to read to Claire when she was in middle school. She hated it at first, said it was boring. But then she grew to love Atticus Finch, said he reminded her of me. I bought the book. It felt like holding a memory in my hands. That night I read the first chapter out loud in the motel room, just to hear my own voice say something again. It made the room feel less hollow. The next morning my phone buzzed again. Claire. My heart thudded so loud I thought I might be imagining it. Her message was short. "I heard you're in Vermont." I stared at it for a long time. My thumbs hovered over the screen, unsure what tone to use. Cold? Distant? Casual? I typed, "Just needed air." She responded almost immediately. "You didn't have to sell the house." That made me stop. I felt a rush of emotion, anger, sadness, confusion, colliding in my chest. I typed back, "I did." Because it stopped feeling like mine. There was a long pause. I watched the typing bubble flicker on and off a few times before disappearing altogether. She didn't reply after that. I didn't know what she was trying to do. Guilt me? Start a conversation? Reclaim control? It didn't matter. That evening I sat by the lake again with the book in my lap, unopened. I watched the wind ripple across the water and thought about something Sarah once said when she was about 12. We were watching a storm roll in over the neighborhood. She said, "The scary part isn't the thunder, it's the waiting." I think that's what life had become for me lately. Waiting. For Claire to say something. For an apology. For closure. But maybe that's not how healing works. Maybe you stop waiting when you realize the person you're waiting on isn't coming. Not because they can't, but because they won't. 3 days passed. Still no reply from Claire. I didn't reach out again. I couldn't. Every word I wanted to say to her already lived in that notebook I kept beside the motel bed. My heart had grown tired of being the first to knock, only to hear the silence knock back. But something shifted in me that week. Maybe it was the air, or the solitude, or the realization that I'd already mourned what I thought I still had. I stopped walking with my phone in my pocket. I stopped watching for her name on the screen. Instead, I made peace with the quiet. Then on a Thursday morning, Sarah called. Not a text, an actual call. I answered on the second ring. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice soft, careful. "Hey." There was a pause. "I talked to Claire," she said. "Really talked." I waited, braced myself. "She doesn't know how to come back from what she said." I swallowed hard. "Maybe she doesn't have to." "She wants to, Dad," Sarah said quickly. She thinks you hate her now." I let out a slow breath. Hate? It had never even occurred to me. "She's my daughter," I said. "There's no version of me that could hate her." Sarah was quiet again, like she was weighing whether to say something more. "She cries about it," she said finally. "She doesn't want me to tell you that, but she does." I felt something shift in my chest, like a rusted door opening, slowly, painfully. "She made her feelings clear," I said, more gently than I expected. "She was hurt," Sarah said. "She doesn't know how to forgive you for leaving." It landed like a slap, but it wasn't untrue. "She was 21 when the divorce happened, Sarah, not a child." "I know," she said, "but the thing about wounds is, they don't care how old you are when they happen." I closed my eyes, let those words settle. "I didn't want to leave the family," I said. "I left a marriage that had already crumbled." "She doesn't see it that way." "I know." There was a pause, long and full of something that felt like understanding. "She asked me if you'd come back to Boston," Sarah said. "Just to talk, nothing dramatic, no big confrontation, just a conversation." My first instinct was to say no, to protect what little peace I'd found here. But then I thought about that old drawing, the stick figures, the crooked hearts, the best dad ever, and wondered what version of myself Claire remembered when she made that. "Okay," I said. "I'll come." Sarah sounded relieved. "You don't have to promise anything, just let her see you." "I can do that." We ended the call and I sat with my thoughts. Going back didn't mean forgetting the wound. It meant being willing to face it, to look it in the eye and ask, what's left here that's still worth saving? I packed my things slowly, folded the notebook and slipped it into my bag, looked around the room one last time, the place that had held me during my grief, during the silence, during the remembering. Then I got in the car and turned south. Toward the house I no longer owned. Toward the daughter I still did. The drive back to Boston was long and quiet. The roads were mostly empty, the skies overcast, and my thoughts filled every mile with questions I didn't know how to answer. What would I say to Claire? What could I say that wouldn't sound like defense or guilt or desperation? I rehearsed a dozen versions of the conversation in my head. All of them ended in silence. When I pulled into the city, it was late afternoon. Sarah had sent me Claire's address the night before. She lived in a townhouse not far from the university where she taught. I sat in the car for almost 10 minutes, watching the front steps, watching the windows, wondering if she was watching too. Eventually, I got out and walked up. My hand hovered over the doorbell. I could still walk away. I could still say I tried. But I pressed it. A minute later, the door opened. Claire stood there. She looked tired, not physically, but in her eyes. That weariness of someone who's carried too much for too long. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. We stood there for a moment, neither of us sure what to do next. Then she stepped aside. "Do you want to come in?" I nodded and followed her inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and books. There were plants in the windows, framed art on the walls, a stack of graded papers on the coffee table. It felt like her. We sat across from each other in the living room. Not touching, not rushing. She spoke first. "I didn't expect you to actually come." "I almost didn't," I said. She looked down, nodded slowly. "I don't blame you." There was a pause. "I was angry," she said. "At you, at Mom, at how everything fell apart." "I know. And when I said what I said at dinner, I meant it. In that moment, I really didn't want you there." I looked at her, trying not to flinch. "But I also didn't mean it," she added, her voice cracking slightly. "I was protecting something in me that still hasn't healed." I nodded. "We hurt the ones who see our wounds." She smiled sadly. "You were a good dad, you know, until you weren't." "I know," I said softly. "And I hate that I became the version of me you couldn't trust." Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "You didn't just leave Mom. You left me. That's how it felt. Like you stopped trying." I wanted to explain, to tell her how I tried, how I called, how I came to every event I was allowed to. But that wasn't what she needed. She didn't need facts. She needed truth. "I never stopped loving you," I said, "even when it hurt too much to be close." Tears slid down her cheeks then. She wiped them quickly, almost embarrassed. "I didn't want the house," she whispered. "I just wanted you to fight for a place in my life." That hit me like a punch. And I realized, all those years of clinging to the house, it wasn't about the structure, it was about the story. The belief that if I held on to it, maybe I was still holding on to us. "I didn't know how to fight in a way that wouldn't push you further away," I said. "So I let go. Of the house, of the anger, of the guilt, because I thought maybe you'd come back if I wasn't holding so tightly." She nodded, slowly, like she understood more than she was ready to say. We sat in silence after that, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one had softness in it, possibility, a kind of quiet that leaves room for things to grow. We didn't hug that night. We didn't fall into each other's arms like some tidy reunion scene in a movie. But we stayed there, two people who had once been everything to each other, now trying to figure out how to start again from scraps. Claire made tea, chamomile. She remembered I liked it. We sat on the couch, both holding our mugs like something sacred. Her hands trembled a little. So did mine. "I kept a lot of things from the old house," she said after a long pause. "Photos. Some of my old school projects. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away." I looked at her. "I thought you wanted to erase all of that." She shook her head. "No, I wanted to understand it, but I didn't know how to reconcile who you were with what I felt after you left." "I was broken too," I said, "not in a way that excuses anything, just broken." She looked down at her tea. "You know what I remember? That night you came to my room after the divorce, you sat on the floor and said you didn't know what to say, so you just stayed until I fell asleep." I nodded. "You didn't want me there." "No, but I needed you there." Her voice caught and she paused. "I think I've spent so many years trying to punish you for the hurt I didn't know what to do with. I felt something unravel inside me. Guilt, love, grief, all wound together for far too long. And I spent those years thinking I didn't deserve a second chance," I said. The silence returned, but this time it wrapped around us gently, not like a wall, but like a blanket. Then she asked a question I wasn't expecting. "Do you regret selling the house?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "No," I said finally. "I regret that it ever had to become a symbol of what we lost, but letting go of it made room for this." She nodded, eyes glassy. "You know," she said, "when Sarah told me you were gone, I stood in my kitchen for half an hour just staring at nothing. I felt like I'd missed something I didn't know I still wanted." "And what was that?" I asked. "A father who still wanted me." I swallowed hard. "I never stopped wanting you, Claire. I just stopped believing I was welcome." Her lips parted, then closed again, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. So I leaned forward and asked quietly, "Do you think there's a way back? For us?" She looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time in years, I saw not the resentment, not the guarded anger, but the girl who used to hold my hand when crossing the street. "I think there is," she said, "but it's going to take time." "I've got time," I replied. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I meant it. We talked for another hour that night, slowly, cautiously, like two people walking across ice, unsure how much weight it could hold. The tea went cold in our mugs. Neither of us moved to warm it. The warmth we needed was already in the room. Before I left, she walked me to the door. "I don't know what this means yet," Claire said, voice low. "It doesn't have to mean anything right away," I told her. "I just wanted to show up." She nodded. "That's a start." I stepped outside, and for a moment I thought she might turn away, go back in without another word. But then she said, "Will you let me call you sometime?" A pause. Then she added, "Just to talk, like we used to." My chest ached in the best way. "I'd like that," I said. She smiled, a real one. Small, fragile, but real. The door closed softly behind me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I'd been shut out. I walked to my car and sat there for a long time, hands on the steering wheel, watching the porch light flicker against the dark. I didn't drive away immediately. I let myself sit with the moment. No rush, no plans, no need to make sense of what would come next. The next few days were quiet. Back in my apartment, the one-bedroom rental I'd moved into after the house sale, I tried to find comfort in the small routines. Coffee in the morning, a walk to the corner store, sorting through the last of the boxes I'd brought with me, most of which I hadn't even opened yet. One of the boxes was marked Memories. Inside, I found old photos, birthdays, beach trips, Halloween costumes. There was one of Claire sitting on my shoulders at a 4th of July parade, her hands in the air, her mouth open mid-laugh. I stared at it for a long time. A few days later, she texted me, "Do you remember that time we got lost in the woods at Lake Winnipesaukee?" I smiled. "You refused to admit we were lost," I replied. "I was testing your survival skills. We ended up finding the car 3 hours later. I had mosquito bites for days. You also found that smooth rock you named Steve and carried around for a year." She replied with a laughing emoji. Then, "I still have Steve." It was a small exchange, but it felt like a door cracking open. Over the next week, the messages came more often. Random memories, silly questions, even the occasional photo. One of her cat curled in a bookshelf, another of an old family ornament she'd found in a box. Each message was a stitch, threading something frayed back together. One evening, she called. Not to talk about the past, just to talk. We spoke for over an hour, about work, about Sarah, about nothing and everything. And when we hung up, I realized I was smiling without even knowing it. The house was gone, the wounds still healing. But something new was taking root, something that might one day be called forgiveness. The weeks that followed were like walking through a house I used to live in, familiar, but not quite mine yet. Claire and I weren't close, not like we had been once, but we were in touch. There were pauses in our conversations, sure, but there was warmth now too, space where trust could start to grow again. She invited me to lunch one Saturday. Her suggestion, not Sarah's. That meant something. We met at a small cafe on a quiet street in Cambridge. She was already seated when I arrived, a mug of tea in her hands, a nervous smile on her face. I ordered black coffee, even though it tasted like ash compared to how I remembered it. We talked about simple things, work, the weather, a new book she was reading. The The kind of light talk people use when they're building a bridge they don't quite trust to stand on yet. Halfway through, she said, "I told my therapist about you." That stopped me. "Oh?" I said, trying to sound casual. "She asked me if I was ready to forgive you." I swallowed but said nothing. Claire took a sip of her tea, then looked at me. Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her, fidgeting slightly. I told her I don't know how. That hurt. But it was honest, and I could live with honesty. "I'm not asking you to," I said. "Not today, maybe not ever. I just want the chance to show you who I still am." She nodded, eyes misting. "That's fair." Then, after a pause, "I've been angry for so long. I didn't realize how much it was costing me." I looked at her. "Anger's heavy. You think you're throwing it at someone, but you end up carrying it everywhere." She smiled faintly. "You sound like a therapist yourself." "Just an old man who's done a lot of wrong." She shook her head. "You weren't all wrong. That's what makes this so confusing." I reached across the table, not to grab her hand, just to be closer. "I'm proud of who you are, Claire. Whether or not you forgive me, whether or not I ever earn your trust again, I look at you and I still see the girl who used to sing in the backseat of my car like she was on stage." That cracked something open. She laughed, then cried, quietly wiping tears away before anyone noticed. "I thought you forgot those things." "I forgot a lot of things I shouldn't have, but not that." We sat in silence after that. Not heavy, not awkward, just full. When we stood to leave, she hugged me. It was quick, a little stiff, but it was a hug. And I held on to it longer than I needed to, because sometimes healing doesn't look like a clean slate. Sometimes it looks like a daughter remembering how it feels to lean into her father's chest and not pull away. After that lunch, something changed, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Claire and I weren't pretending anymore. We weren't dancing around the pain. We had looked it in the eye and agreed not to let it define us forever. She started calling every few days. We'd talk about her students, my weekend plans, the little things that make up a life. I stopped checking my phone with dread. I started hoping her name would show up. One Saturday, she invited me over for dinner. I paused before answering, heart thudding in my chest. "Just us?" I asked. "Just us," she confirmed. "No tension, no speeches, just dinner." It was the first time I'd been to her home since our talk. She greeted me at the door with a soft smile and a timid hug, the kind that says, "I'm still learning how to do this again." Inside, the table was already set. Nothing fancy, just 2 plates, a small vase of wildflowers in the middle, and the scent of garlic and rosemary in the air. "I made chicken, like you used to," I smiled. "With lemon?" "Of course." As we ate, the conversation flowed naturally. There was still space between us, but not the kind that divides, the kind that breathes. After dinner, we sat on her couch with mugs of tea. Claire picked up a small photo frame from the end table and handed it to me. It was the same picture Sarah had shown me months ago. The camping trip, the marshmallows, the oversized hoodies. Claire's head resting on my shoulder, both girls smiling wide. "I used to hide this," she said softly. "After the divorce, I couldn't look at it without feeling confused." "Confused how?" "Like I missed you and hated you at the same time." I nodded. "That makes sense." "I don't feel that way anymore," she added. "I still get sad, sometimes angry. But I don't hate you." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Thank you," I whispered. She reached beside her and picked up a small wooden box. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Old birthday cards, notes I'd written her as a child, even some I didn't remember sending. "I kept these," she said, "even when I was mad, even when I told myself I didn't care." My throat tightened. "I kept everything," she said. It was too much. I felt my chest tighten, my vision blur, but I didn't hide it. I let her see. She leaned in then, gently, and rested her head against my shoulder, just like in the picture. No words, just closeness. The years between us fell quiet for a moment. Not erased, but softened. When I left that night, I stood on her front step for a long time, looking at the stars, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not closure, but return. The days after that night felt different. There was no grand reconciliation, no sudden rewriting of the past, but there was something new, an ease, a thread of connection that no longer felt strained or one-sided. Claire would text me photos of her garden or tell me about a book she was reading. I'd send her jokes or old stories from my own youth she'd never heard. Nothing profound, but everything meaningful. One afternoon, she called and asked if I'd help her hang a shelf in her living room. I brought my old tool set, the same one I used to fix her wobbly nightstand back when she was 11. We argued over the level, laughed when we hung it crooked the first time, and ordered pizza when we realized neither of us had eaten all day. That evening, before I left, she said, "I think about that dinner a lot. The one where I told you not to be there." I didn't say anything, just let her talk. I was so full of resentment that I didn't realize how much I still wanted you to be in my life. I think I was trying to punish you for not being perfect. I never expected you to forgive me, I said. I just hoped one day you'd let me try again. She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. "You are trying," she said. "And I see it now." There was a pause. "Do you regret selling the house?" she asked again. I looked past her out the window, watching the wind move through the trees. "No," I said. "The house wasn't where the healing needed to happen. It was just a place. We needed to find a way back to each other without walls." She nodded slowly. "I still have dreams about that house sometimes," she said. "Not the building, just us, being okay inside it." "We're getting there," I said. "One shelf at a time." She laughed, a soft, real laugh. Before I left, she gave me something, small, wrapped in brown paper. I opened it later that night. It was the beaded necklace she made when she was 5, the one with Dad spelled in shaky plastic letters. There was a note with it. "For the version of you I lost, and the one I'm getting to know again." I held it in my hand for a long time. Not because it was a gift, but because it was a symbol of memory, of mercy, of motion towards something better. I didn't need the house. I didn't need an apology carved in stone. I just needed that moment, that offering, that quiet declaration, "I see you, I haven't forgotten," and somehow in all the letting go, I found what I thought I had lost. Not the house, not even the family as it once was, but the sacred, fragile truth that sometimes love returns, in broken pieces, in changed people, but it returns. If this story touched something deep inside you, don't just scroll past. I want to hear your story. Have you ever been pushed away by someone you love? Have you ever forgiven a family member who never apologized? Leave a comment below. Tell me what part of this story stayed with you the most. And if you believe stories like this matter, stories of broken hearts, healing, and forgiveness, then hit subscribe, share this video with someone who needs it, and don't leave just yet. The next story is waiting for you right here on the screen. Click it now, and I'll meet you there.